Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Jeg snakker I åpningen på engelsk, I respekt for våre utenlandske gjester. So I suppose that all people here understand what I'm saying, even if it is in English. As a president of the Norwegian National Commission for UNESCO, I'm delighted to welcome you to this seminar, and for some of you, welcome to Oslo and Norway. Thank you very much to the organizers, and especially to Fritt Ord for inviting us here. This seminar is this year's celebration of World Press Freedom Day. As the spring outside itself, we take it a little earlier, a little in advance. And as our very old national poet who has written our national song, Bjørnstjerne Bjørnson, said at some time, jeg velger meg april. He said, I choose April when the old is falling, when the new takes hold. It makes some noise and uproar, though peace is not the best, but that we really want something. And I think those words fits very well into the situation. This day is an occasion to inform people of violations of the press freedom. And it is a day to encourage initiatives in favor of press freedom and to remind governments of their commitments. It is also a day to remember journalists who lost their lives in the exercise of their profession. In a large number of countries, publications are censored and closed down, journalists are harassed, attacked, detained, and even murdered. Only this year, at least 11 journalists and 6 media assistants have been killed at work, according to Reporters Without Borders. It also is a day to give our gratulations to the Turkish journalist Ahmet Sik, the winner of the 2014 UNESCO Guillermo Cano World Press Freedom Prize. And as we shall hear later today, Ukraine is also one example, and a very, very present example, of a place and a country in which journalists are facing serious challenges. So we look forward to meet the journalists Sergey Leschenko and Mustafa Nayyem. We follow the situation in their country, Ukraine, with fear and unrest. And in addition today to hear stories from journalists working in Ukraine, this seminar includes a presentation of the main findings from a coming report on government, surveillance and press freedom in Norway. And not least, we will be presented a new study on young Norwegians' use of media, including social media, and their attitudes towards freedom of expression, surveillance and protection of privacy. I can assure you that there will be some interesting findings, and we're going to have a very interesting day. Press freedom and press freedom of expression are closely linked and are vital elements of democracy. Promoting these rights is one of the core tasks of UNESCO and other institutions, and I hear it said today that democracy is the most important weapon in Ukraine. In addition to being a basic human right, freedom of expression is included in the Norwegian Constitution in paragraph 100, and this year we are celebrating our Constitution's 200 years anniversary, shedding the light on this crucial right and the challenges surrounding it today, and that is of high importance. I'm sure we will have an interesting seminar in the spirit of freedom and human rights, in the spirit of finding the truth. So I wish you all very heartily welcome to the seminar. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Per-Anders Johansen, a leading journalist in the newspaper Aftenposten, who will be our moderator today. And thank you for doing that job. Welcome again.
I'm really happy to introduce two of the most important and impressive journalists from Ukraine right now, Mustafa Nayyem and Sergey Leschenko. I'm happy that you're here and that you have taken time. I guess both of these guys would have liked to be a completely different place right now, doing journalism. We will do it this way. We will have a conversation in the beginning. I will try to make time so that all of you can get the chance to ask questions in the end. But I think we should start with the most important thing. Sergey and Mustafa, what's the current situation in Ukraine? What can you tell us about how the situation is right now?
Hello. Hi, thank you for coming. First of all, we didn't expect so many people because we don't think we are so famous in Norway. And I think we will show you a little presentation we prepared for you and trying to explain what happened before these days and what's going on now. And my friend Sergey will start it.
Would we start with a small presentation? Okay. And I should stay there? Or?
Yeah, you can stay here. Or,
okay.
yeah.
So, thank you for coming, thank you for invitation, and we have very short presentation because I think it's better to discuss than to have a long speeches. We are journalists, we like to ask questions, to answer the questions. So, as you remember, this guy was Ukrainian president for 4 years, and the corrupted presidency of him was the main precondition of last Maidan in Ukraine. And there are just a few numbers to recall that only official estimate worth of his claim was $500 million, but new government research at least $32 billion which were laundered during his presidency.
Only in Russia.
Yeah, and no, I mean $32 billion laundered during his presidency, and Yanukovych was representative of the most powerful and brutal clan in Ukraine, and the precondition for Maidan was postponing of association agreement negotiation with European Union, and our idea is that he decided to postpone this negotiation because it was impossible to falsify presidential elections 2015 in conditions of association with European Union. And also Russia was the main sponsor of Yanukovych regime. They provided him 15 billion loan and provided him weapons, provided him political consultants, provided him military consultants, and finally they provided him military support when he asked for intervention of Russian troops from Rostov-na-Donu, from Russian city close to Ukrainian border. Also some numbers about people who were the main heroes of last months in Ukraine, the Maidaners. 88% are men, 12 were women. Average age was 37 years old, and there were 88% of guests from different regions of Ukraine, and only half of the guests who participated in Maidan, they were from western part of Ukraine. It means that Maidan was not a revolution of Western people from Western Ukraine, or revolution of nationalists, or revolution who people who believes in some radical ideas. It's just to recall, because now Russia propaganda uses this information trying to explain Western audience that Maidan was the idea of Ukrainian nationalists. It's not true, and these numbers can prove it. So, Viktor Yanukovych left Ukraine 2 months ago, and he left the corrupted mansion, he left incredible wealth in this palace, and I think, Mustafa, you can explain us, because you were the person who entered this palace among the first.
Actually, it's like a big palace. I don't know, have you ever seen this palace of French kings, and so the French kings was very poor compared to Yanukovych, and what we had before, we just had this picture. This picture was made at the day of when people entered the Medjugorje, but before that, 3 years in a row, Leschenko and our other colleagues, they wrote a lot of investigation about his residence, because we suspected that this territory was actually it was stolen from people, from Ukrainian people.
Yeah, it's former state residence, like residence for guests from abroad, and some foreign guests were staying in this residence while they were visiting Ukraine. But when Yanukovych came to power, he decided to steal this property.
To capture, he liked this territory.
Let's go further.
Those are 100 people who died on Maidan. You know that the first guy who died on 16th of January, and was Armenian guy. It was not Ukrainian and not Russian, not Jewish. It was Armenian guy, black guy with big mustaches. It's about fascists and those anti-Semites on Maidan. You can imagine what people was there if only the first guy was not Ukrainian and the second was not Ukrainian, who was from Belarus, and then there are a lot of people from Georgia. So we now call them, I don't know, sky hundreds. The thing is that heaven, yeah, okay, heavenly hundred. Okay, you know it better because I know it in Ukrainian, and we think that those people sacrificed their life for our future. And it's true because none of them are members of political parties. None of them are members of right-wing parties. And it's true. It's about, again, about Russian propaganda, because those people who was died, they was not politicians. They were just simple guys, 30, 40 years. Our friends who we met on Maidan, we see them on Maidan. And the day when they died, it was 21st of February. You know that at that day, our opposition signed a deal with Yanukovych, recognizing him as a president. So you can just think and to imagine how the people feel after that, after this deal.
Yeah, after Yanukovych left Ukraine, Russian troops occupied Crimea, and so-called green people, it was just regular military from Russia, and Russia did not recognize their own soldiers during first weeks and even first months of the occupation, and now we have very similar situation in eastern part of Ukraine. And this leaflet, we would like to recall you, if you are familiar with this, is this leaflet from presidential campaign 2004. And the borders of this leaflet, they are very similar to the borders of so-called New Novorossiya, or the region which Putin called the former part of Russia Empire. And these leaflets were prepared by Russia spin doctors from Yanukovych camp 9 years ago. It means that first seeds of this separatism was shared 9 years ago using this black PR.
Yeah, why we are showing that? Because now Russian propaganda, because we call them propaganda, our colleagues, so-called colleagues from Russian, they tell you that the problem of Eastern Ukraine is problem of new government of Ukraine. It's not true, because the idea of dividing Ukraine appeared 9 years ago, before this government. Dividing of Ukraine on three sorts. One of them, you know, the third part, it was part of Russian. So they tried to do that even in 2004, 2005. Now it's just planning and they're realizing their plans. So it's not something new for us.
Yeah. So Russian military secret services, together with separatists, announced Donetsk Republic in Ukraine, and Mustafa was visiting Donetsk last week, so share your news and your impression after this visit, please.
You know, it looks like it's government of symbols, governments of flags, but during those days I've been to Donetsk, I haven't seen any leaders of them. If you ask them, who are your leaders? Who is the government of this republic? They can tell you. But what we know exactly, but there is some people who are traveling from city to the city, paying people to do these flags and to protest. So we suspect that the money Yanukovych laundered during his presidency now works on these issues, because they are trying to support the separatists to show the new government that you can do nothing with us.
Yes, and there are some evidence that Yanukovych and his allies left Ukraine with a cash, and it was not just a regular, like our pocket, but it was a huge amount of money, billions of dollars in cash, and they left Ukraine to Russia with this cash, and now they use this money to support separatists. Clashes in Slavyansk were killed some separatists, and this car was recognized as a car of separatists.
Trying to show you that it's the elements of this propaganda which became ridiculous, in our internet society. You see this car. This car was burned, and one guy died, and after that, Russian journalists in burned car they found a business card of leader of right sector. Do you know that? Just imagine this car was in flame, and after that there is only one thing saved. It was this business card. After that, in internet started a lot of flash mobs about this business card, because just imagine that this guy from right sector, his name is he's Dmitry Yarosh, and I can't even say, does he have a business card? I mean, it's very...
Do you have his business card?
I don't have, but because he knows he's a very popular guy in our country, so for him to have business card and to put it in burnt car in the east of Ukraine, it's something ridiculous. So after that, we had a lot of things in the internet like that, because it's ridiculous. You see what this information is not our sources, sources of international observers, and those troops we have now in the border of Ukraine, in the west, in the east and south of Ukraine. So you can see how many people, how many forces, they're just training near the borders of Ukraine. They have right to train, but it looks like they're not only training. After Crimea, we're a little bit...
Yeah, and there are some numbers to compare the Russian forces and Ukrainian forces, and you can see that it's impossible to compare, because Ukraine is much, much weaker than Russia in military sense, of course. Not in the sense of human
will and spirit. Okay, for us, it's like, why we are showing that? That this war is not about competition. We are not staying, we are not waiting for some chances for victory if war will start. So you can see that it's obvious Ukrainian is not. It doesn't have any chance to win, or any chance even to stand. By our calculations, it's observers and experts. If Russian troops will invade Ukraine, Ukrainian government can stay behind in face of this invasion just for 2 hours, and after that we will break down.
Yeah. Go further. We would like to share some examples of Russia propaganda during these events, and this famous photo from one of the Russian activists who was playing two roles on two different TV channels of Russia. On channel NTV. He was representative of local separatists, local pro-Russian activists, and he was beaten by right sector radicals. And NTV shared this news as an example of nationalists in power in Ukraine.
In evening news, at the same day,
Yeah.
other channel showed the same guy. You don't see that, maybe you see that. You know, the Russian one, and showing that this guy he's not the victim, but he is from right sector. And it was ridiculous. It looks like, you know, it's not newsrooms in Russia. We had factory of propaganda, because they're using the same things in different channels and different news source, and they're, you know, building new reality in one point. So we can't even see what is difference between real life and the life they're building for you.
And we are wrapping up our discussion. Just want to show that there are some polls, recent polls, and these polls shows that Russia TV is a quite powerful source of propaganda in Ukraine, because 30% of Ukrainians use Russia TV as a source of information. But the next slide will show why there are so many pro-Russian moods in southern and eastern part of Ukraine. So here you see that 30% of Ukrainians use Russia TV as a source of information, and here you see that in southern Ukraine, 47 Ukrainians use Russia TV as the source of information. This is the second most powerful source of information among Ukrainians in southern Ukraine, and that is why Russia has so much influence in this area.
And last information, if you don't know, that in eastern regions and southern regions, just yesterday, Ukrainian channels was switched off, and they were, instead of them now transmitting, broadcasting Russian TV only. So you can imagine the moods in these regions when Russian journalists carrying them by so-called right sector or fascists. So they're preparing something. They're preparing some basis for something, because the biggest event we have, and we are waiting for that, it's a presidential election. It looks like Russia trying to disrupt this election, because it's only one way to prove all the world that Ukraine is not state, failed state, as they say. But it's not true, and we will do everything to have this election. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for this time. We were asked to have a short presentation. We can discuss during hours, and let's go
But
further.
just one fast question. Do you think there will be a war? Are we closer to a war?
I think there could be some separatist activity supported by Russian secret services, Russian military secret services, so-called GUR. And there are a lot of evidence that these guys are in Ukraine now, and it's quite difficult for Russia just to make this intervention like it was happened in Crimea, because Russian troops were on the ground in Crimea. Now they can do it using these secret groups of Russian military, I think. So there is smaller chance for direct intervention, but you know, if you asked me 3 months ago that Russia would occupy part of Ukraine, I would say no, it's impossible. But you're asking me now, is it possible we will face the war? I don't know, but for me, the situation now is like no direct intervention, but using pro-Russia provocators.
I think we should go back a few months to November, when the Maidan was starting, and I was thinking, Mustafa, what were you thinking when you were doing this Facebook message? Today they blame me that you started the whole thing by asking people to go down to Maidan. I know that you say that it was not you and you don't have, but what do you think about this after all that happened?
He's a modest guy.
Actually, I didn't expect that there will be big consequences. first, and the second is that even at that day, even at that night, the next morning, we thought that it would finish maybe in 2 days, in 3 days, because during the last 3 years, a lot of politicians and a lot of people, observers, told us that, you know, people are so disappointed, and after our revolution, we don't have chance to make it again. But what was very, very inspiring that night, it was that it was rainy night, and people starting together at 10:30, and there was only journalists, young people, students. It was quite different people than we saw before that. I mean, in Orange Revolution. So for me, it was maybe the brightest days of Maidan, because after that, agenda was changed. You know, after first breakdown, it was not revolution for Europe. It was revolution for dignity, for everything, but not for Europe.
The first evening, you were about 500-600 who came down and followed your Facebook message. Yes.
No, it was more than 1,000.
1,000, yeah.
At first night. But next night we have more than 2,000. And the third day, students joined us, and they played a very big role and crucial role in these events.
But you say this was some of the best days of your life, but what was the turning point? When did this become a nightmare?
It was 29th of November, you know, when first night when government tried to use brutal force against people. So it became obvious that we are living in different world, because it was first time in Ukrainian history when government uses policemen so brutal against peaceful demonstrators. Because if, for example, just imagine that Maidan was staying not students and journalists or activists, but for example, politicians, it's something different. But those people were peaceful, and I know that. And it was obvious that we will not accept it again. And if Yanukovych do something that day, for example, he can, I don't know, say that he's apologizing, for example, at least, maybe events will be not so dramatic.
You know, if I told my editor that, well, today I made a demonstration, I'm sure I would have been fired. How did your editor come back? Because how did your editor react? I mean, you became an activist, there's no doubt about that.
I will tell you, my editor was maybe one of the first who came to the Maidan. But I think that your colleagues 200 or 300 years ago did the same things. And we are our starting point. In Ukraine, journalists are not only journalists, and it's true. As a politician, because politicians in Ukraine are not only politicians. They're also oligarchs, they're also activists, criminal authorities. So why journalists can be activists? It doesn't mean that we are staying on some side of this conflict, but it was not conflict for me. I would like to live in other country. For example, imagine that in your city, someone will try to convince you that you have to live in Russia. I think as a citizen, you will be against that. Maybe as a journalist, are you going to cover this issue unbiased, that you maybe in Russia, maybe in Norway? I don't think so. So please let us to do that.
But while Mustafa was making demonstrations, Sergey, you have been working with Yanukovych and the corruption in Ukraine for a long time. As you heard, he told you something, but there's very few people in Ukraine that has been working so hard on these issues. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started going into working as an investigative reporter and writing about corruption in Ukraine? Because everybody knows that's not the news. Everybody knows it's corruption there.
We started because our founder, Georgi Gongadze, was killed, and we were trying to investigate this story in year 2000, and it was maybe the beginning of our investigation journalism, because the secret tapes from presidential cabinet were shared by his bodyguard, and then...
Do everybody here know about the story of Gongapse? Perhaps you should mention it.
People do not remember maybe. He was found beheaded in the forest close to our capital in November 2000. He disappeared 2 months before, and then secret tapes of presidential bodyguard were published, and there were evidence that President of Ukraine, Leonid Kuchma, ordered to kill our founder. So it was just the precondition of our investigations. And of course, corruption in Ukraine is like a cancer. This corruption is everywhere, especially in politics. And of course, if we are covering political news, we are making some investigation as well. And Yanukovych was so corrupted that it's, even for us, for journalists, it was very difficult to predict, because the proofs of his corruption, which were found in his mansion when he left Ukraine, it's something unbelievable. They're just documents which show that cash, millions of cash, were put in his personal bank to launder this money and then to use to build this palace. And the price of the estimated price just of this building, just of this palace, is over $100 million. And this is only one palace. And he used to have a lot of palaces like this all over the Ukraine. But palace, it was just the final point of his corrupted attempts. Money were laundered from coal industry, from energy, from telecommunications, from banking business. So the final destination of this money laundering process was a cash and this palace, because he used this money to build his personal heaven. You know, this territory of his residence, it's over 140 hectares, over 500 acres. So it's almost like Monaco.
But is it right to say that you're both work in Ukrainska Pravda, that this newspaper, which is an independent and hard-working newspaper, is some kind of a monument on this beheaded editor?
Yes, I would like to say that, yes, we are trying to do our job every day, and to do this and to remember about his destiny.
But how many years did it take you before you were able to get out the truth about how he was killed? He was killed in 2000.
Oh, he was killed in 2000, and then secret tapes were published in few weeks, in 2 months. So the suspicion.
The prosecution took many years.
Yes, he was killed in 2000, and the first group of killers were charged by law enforcement in 2005, and the person, the high-rank police official who killed him personally, he was charged in 2008. So it took 8 years.
And now everybody believes that the next president in Ukraine will be the chocolate king, Petro Poroshenko. Do you believe that?
He has the highest rating.
Yeah.
So the highest chance for him to be a president.
Yeah. How corrupt is he?
He's not an angel.
But he has admitted that he has paid bribes too. Yeah.
It's difficult for us to say, because we need just some evidence of this. But you know, we know rumors that it's impossible in Ukraine to build this business empire without paying bribes. It's more clear for him to say. It's more clear to say that, more correct to say that he was involved in some political corruption, because he was on different position in government, in different parties. He was looking for his personal profits, changing parties. But it's quite usual activity for politicians in Ukraine. Mustafa, what do you think about our possible president.
Let's wait for results of election.
Very, very correct answer. But
So you're starting investigate after the election?
No, the thing is that I think we don't have candidates for president now, which were not before that oligarchs or crime authorities or prosecutors, which is equal to crime authorities in Ukraine. So it's very hard to compare them, but what is obvious that all of them comparing with Yanukovych is angels. So in that case we can be a little bit happier, but only a little bit, because I think times when we just allow them to do what they want, this time's finished. Now we have to control them, all of them.
But one of the things that has impressed me much with you, Mustafa, and of course you too, Sergey, but I've seen that you have been also writing critical stories about the people who got power after Maidan. I saw you criticize the new government, for instance, for not working enough with the eastern Ukraine. How has it been when you have been doing journalism the other way, trying to be critical toward the new people in power?
First of all, I have to remember that we were not fighting for this government. Even more, during Maidan, I think most Maidaners, people who were staying on Maidan, they hate opposition. Because every day we had only negotiations between opposition and Yanukovych. But people on the Maidan, they didn't support of them. For example, our Prime Minister, who now the head of our government, he has 6% rates of support in Maidan. Just imagine who now in our government. Tymoshenko, she was absent on Maidan. Turchinov, people even did allow him to make a statement. So,
yeah.
You
might correct him.
No, did not allow.
Did not.
Yeah, did not.
Yeah.
Did not allow.
I mean, his own team. Svoboda, right wing. You know, it's so-called right wing because they tried to use these radical mottos and radical words during campaigns, but in real case, when was fights on streets, Svoboda was so passive. So there was not even radical, they were just regular people. And during last 2 years, they lost all their rates. Because they had before 12%, now they have only 6%. So it's first what I want to remember, that we were not staying for this government.
Yeah.
We were staying for values. And when we are criticizing them, we are not criticizing Maidan, we are criticizing them. Because they were part of this system. I want to remember again one thing, that all those who are now member of parliament, a member of government, they were member of parliament all these 3 years. Yes, and there was part of this system, corrupted system, political system, and economic system. And now they're trying to use the same mechanisms to earn money or to control juridical system, tax administration, and etc. So we are trying to show them that, guys, we had Maidan and we will not allow you to do it again. You are so weak now because you doesn't have support of people. Please do something. That's why we are criticizing them.
I would like just to add very quickly that I think politicians were very unhappy because of Maidan. They were very unhappy. They did not want to join Maidan during first days because all politicians were preparing for presidential elections 2015. And the result is that on the upcoming presidential elections, we do not have candidates who were preparing for these elections. We do not have Yatsenyuk as a candidate because he is not running. We do not have Vitaly Klitschko, who was the favorite of the campaign just 5 months ago because his support is so poor now. and we do not have a Yanukovych because he disappeared from Ukraine. So Maidan was completely unpredictable for politicians, and I think that opposition leaders, they were not happy because of this gathering of people, and they were pushed to support these people because it was impossible to stay just outside of Maidan when people were gathered. 500,000 came to the Krещатик, the main street of Ukraine, next morning after the first crackdown, which was happened in the end of November.
Mustafa, you mentioned Svoboda, and you, Sergey, wrote an article in the Norwegian newspapers a month ago where you criticized Norwegian journalists for writing too much about the right
Because
wings.
nationalists, they were not the main actors on Maidan, and we demonstrated you some polls that people from Western Ukraine, they were only half of the guests, and I think Svoboda, they're trying to demonstrate that they are main heroes of Maidan, but it's just because they're politicians. They want to demonstrate, every politicians
So they want to take credit for the revolution.
want to demonstrate that they are heroes.
But was it so smart of the new government to let so many from the Svoboda party get into the cabinet? Was it right to let them?
Yeah, it's a mistake. I could just criticize them because it was not the smartest decision to share the power among three political parties, and we are criticizing these guys about it every time when we have this possibility. Yeah. Yeah.
So you say it's a mistake, yeah?
I think it's a huge mistake, yeah, because they had to provide some position in government for local elites from eastern Ukraine, and to provide some opinion leaders, to provide some position for opinion leaders, for moral leaders, instead of some unknown political activists from low level, from Svoboda party. Because, for instance, the governor of Poltava region, one of the big region in the heart of Ukraine, the governor of this region became MP from the small city council, not even from Poltava, from Kremenchuk. And the governor of this region became this guy. This guy was only one representative of Svoboda in local city council of Kremenchuk. But this position was provided for him because it was a political vote for party of Svoboda.
What do you think?
I think that we should see on facts. First of all, the more radical power in Maidan was right sector, not Svoboda. And right sector is not involved in this government at all. Any member of right sector are appointed in any position. This is true, and you can check it.
But they have some lower positions on that?
No, they don't have any positions in new government. Anyone, in local or in national level. Zero. So this is the fact. And unfortunately, international media are not talking about that. The second is that, about Svoboda. What said Sergey? They lost their rights in Ukraine. Is that the signal that Ukraine doesn't support them? Why international media, they're asking us, please say that they are bad guys. They are bad guys, that's why we are not support them.
Yeah,
that's why we are criticizing them. But unfortunately, international media are not talking about it. But what about mistakes? I'm asking you, we have mistakes. Was that mistake that during 3 years, Norwegian government and institution, European Union, did nothing to investigate money laundering of Yanukovych? From one side, European leaders told us about rights, human rights, about freedom of speech, freedom of media. From other side, we saw Ashton a lot of times handshaking with Yanukovych, even when people was dying on Maidan. Tell me, please, was that mistake? Yes, it was a mistake. And we didn't ask for sanctions against Yanukovych. We just asked, please, follow your national rules, the national laws. Just please investigate why his assets and companies are registered in offshores, why he is using your government and your people and your countries to steal money from our people. And governments was keeping silence during 3 years. And that, the consequence of this policy of European Union and the United States is what we had in Maidan. This is most biggest mistake. And I think it's bigger mistake. There's just some member of Svoboda, and I can say it frankly, that I don't like them. And all journalists in Ukraine don't like them. And all liberals in Ukraine don't like them. And you know that even those politicians who are now running for presidency, they don't like them. They even don't want to stay in one stage with them. And you are just showing us that there is Svoboda. Yes, we have that. But from the other side, you know what is about Russian propaganda about Europe? If you're saying about Europe, that Europe has equal rights, good juridical system, what they say about Europe? About Breivik. Not about your laws. And this is the symbol, and that what doing Norwegian journalists against Ukraine.
It's an example of propaganda machine, how it works in Russia.
But we are disappointed that European journalists using the same methods against Ukraine. Because we can remember everything about Europe, but we are sharing the values, not the system of propaganda of Russian Federation. Let's see that way.
But you are in the right land if you want to say something critical about EU, you know. We have said no to EU 2 times. And could you say something more about that? Because for many years, during the 90s, after 20 years, Europe had paid quite little attention to what happened in Ukraine. What more could we have done from the western part of the world to support you in all those years when you were working?
All last years.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. No. True. In the years that have been, what kind of mistakes did Western countries do?
You mean Norway or European Union? Because you are outside of European Union, but you are a member of JEFTA, so European.
So stress it that Norway government and European politicians.
No, I think the best favor for Ukrainian society is the creation of democratic institution, I think. So it's very, very obvious that to keep, if you want to have a democracy, we need to create institution of democracy, or so-called infrastructure of democracy, which means unbiased media, rule of law and unbiased judges, fair police, and access to public information for everybody in Ukraine. And even local referendums as the next step, because now it's a tool just for Russia to destroy Ukraine, but in future it has to be a part of this infrastructure of democracy. And we cannot, relaunch our political system without this, and we cannot invite Norwegian politicians to be our governors and our ministers. We need to create a frame for our local politicians, how to keep them under control and do not allow them to be corrupted. It's very difficult to do this. It's like, everyday, very routine job. But it's impossible to avoid this on the way to create a real European country. And your role as a big human rights fighter, I think it's crucial, and of course we can engage you, do this through Council of Europe, through your Norway institutions, to raise your voice in support of Ukrainian democracy and Ukrainian democratic institutions.
But for instance, Hromadske TV, which you work in, Mustafa, who has been a very important free way of expressing information. Could the Hromadske TV have existed without support from the West?
When every time I'm listening to someone from European Union or outside Ukraine about some support, many people, they're waiting us to ask them money, but money is the last thing we need from Europe. And it's true. I will explain why. If European Union will investigate all money which is laundering on Europe, we don't need money. The second is that if European Union will support us not by money but by traditions,
why you are doing, I mean not you, but European leaders, they're taking our government money and they are not controlling those money. And those money are going for bribes, for buying voters, but not for democracy. From the other side, for example, European Union paid $20 million to provide Ukraine with election code, but this code was not adopted. $20 million. Just this money is enough to establish in Ukraine a lot of medias. A lot of medias. But this code is not adopted. And we know, and you know, and it's not secret, that those money was stolen. So this, what I want to say, that we don't need money. Just help us to be like you. Don't tell us that give this money, take this money and get out. We are not slaves of Europe. We want to be equal. But to be equal, you have to behave as equal, believe that we can do that. There are a lot of people in Ukraine who can and who know how to live in real democracy. But people who don't want, they are on top of our government now, and you are communicate with them. If you will ask Yatsenyuk and our government, if you will ask our new president, please don't do mistakes made Yanukovych. Please don't money laundering. Please pay taxes. Please do the very simple steps. For example, public broadcast. It's a very simple thing. We have the base for that. Please adopt the law about freedom of access of information. Full package of that. Anti-corruption. If you will push them without money, it's easier to pay money. Just push them publicly and help us to push them. Let's do it together. I think in 2-3 years, you don't need to spend money on Ukraine. You will have partner. But now it looks like you are trying to feed a big dragon, which one day will be a problem for all Europe. So please help us to be equal, but not the marginalized member of Europe.
One of the things we've been talking about is the Russian propaganda, and I can assure that one of the things that really scared me when I'm working with these issues in Aftenposten is how much it is, how hard it is. But I saw that quite a short time ago you had a dialogue meeting with Russian journalists. Isn't that true? What do you think about the Russian journalists who are taking part in this propaganda war towards Ukraine? And is there any way of reaching out and finding some common ground?
The Russian journalists, there are two types of them, because for me, first of them really try to understand what's going on, and the other side of them, they're cooperating with the government. And what is different between media in Ukraine and in Russia? Russian media, they're building some reality without any mentions of real life. They're trying to convince you that we are fascists, but when you're asking them, please look at me and just tell me, am I a fascist? Or for example, Khodorkovsky, who was, Russian Jewish, he had a statement on stage of Maidan, please tell me about what fascists are you talking about. But they are building new reality, and this machine works for a lot of years, and they're working very hard, and they're paid very good, and they have very professional journalists, very professional operators and producers, and they have very good picture. I think the picture of Russian TV now is comparing with CNN and Sky News. So you have enemy on your borders, not in our, because we know what's going on in our country. But you are the victims of this propaganda, not Ukrainian people, and this is a very important thing.
But you say that you know what's going on in your country. I would just want to talk about this picture a bit more, because this is a good example of how really challenging it is to be a journalist in Ukraine. Because, this was an incident. This picture has been all over in the Western media. It was one from, according to the pro-Russian rebels, it was an attack, and you told about the the business card. But now there are so many things happening, so many incidents, and we really don't know what happened, because everything is some kind of a flurry, dark thing.
Well,
are you still investigating, for example?
May I ask you one question? I'm sorry for this question, but this is obviously our problem. But why you don't know what is going on? We are writing about it. We are talking about it. You don't know not because of us, but because you are listening to other sources of information. You are listening to Russian TV that telling you some particular details, but not whole picture of Ukraine. Because whole picture of Ukrainian reality now is very, very complicated. It's not easy to say that part of Ukraine fascist, part of Ukraine pro-Russian. It's not that true. Yeah, we have those right wings, but we have pro-Russian citizens. But it is not the face of Ukraine. We have other reality. And you don't know not because of us. You don't know because you get used to listen to those Russian propaganda. At the end of this war, you are victims of this propaganda, not we, because we know what's going on in our country.